I'm going to start ending my sermons like that. That's it. Just be done. That's it. We're done. It's not, is it? I mean, we sing of faith, we sing of connection with God, because that is how our hearts have been created by Him. You know, the amazing thing of what I do day to day in my day job, working in the nursing home and being around so many people that have been afflicted with the disease of dementia, Alzheimer's, is so very often they can't tell you what day it is, or, you know, can't recall lunch or breakfast or whatever. But when we get together and have chapel every morning, we sing kind of one hymn every week, every day. We'll sing that same hymn. And I'll put the words together, give them little song sheets, but so many of them remember these songs like Amazing Grace. They know it from memory, they know it from heart, because it's been built in there. And as the disease kind of picks them apart, it can't pick apart what's in their soul. And that's how God's designed us. It can't take away those things that have been enrooted in their very spirit. That's why we sing these songs. That's why we sing any song that helps us understand God more and our relation to Him. And so it was fun to sing that this morning, and a fun tune to go along with it. I had one lady a couple weeks ago, I forget what we were singing, but she could not stay awake the entire chapel. I mean, I did the devotion, we read scripture, we did prayer, and she was snoozing the whole time. And we start singing, I forget which song it was, but I looked over about halfway through the song, and she is dead asleep, but singing the words. She just sat there singing right along with it. And I told her after, I said, how sweet was that? She woke up, I said, how sweet was that you were singing the song? She goes, oh, I was awake. I just needed to close my eyes. I said, oh, is that how it works? So those of you that are awake but need to close your eyes this morning, just know I get it, I understand. That's all right. So, you know, when I went to school, we had every 6 weeks at Carrydale Elementary School, home of the Cougars, we had an awards assembly. You know, probably your children, your grandchildren may do something like that. And when I went in there and we sat in our gymnatorium. You know, from the suburbs, everything had to have multiple purposes. So it was gym / auditorium / cafeteria. So really, it was a cafetorium. And so we went and sat on the floor, and the principal would come up and read out all the names. And I'm not going to shock you here. I rarely got called to go up and get an academic award, all right? My friend, on the other hand, his name was Ken Letourneau. Ken lived down the street from me. Ken was a very good student. Not a good student. And so Ken would get called up for everything. Perfect attendance, A in science, A in math, A in history, A in language arts. And then they would have him come up, and each time he went up, he got a pencil or an eraser. All the kids who won, they get a certificate. And every 6 weeks I had to watch Ken walk up there and be like, how many pencils does this guy need? He's got 1,000 of them just from this assembly. And every assembly, it was the same way, Ken Letourneau, Ken Letourneau, Ken Letourneau. Then they'd be like, now we're going to call up our honor roll students. I'm like, well, of course he's going to get called up. I mean, that's all the A and B students, right? So he goes up, he gets his award for that, and they got a bag, I guess, to put all their pencils in and their awards. And then they would do principal's honor roll, which is a higher level, the dean's list, I guess, when you're in elementary school. And that was straight A's. They bring that sucker back up again. I'm like, wait, how many honor rolls does he get to be on? He lived right down the street from me, and I always tried to get into his house. His parents were like particular about the carpet. They were the kind of ones that on their steps, they had the plastic over the steps protecting. It was carpeted, but with plastic over the top. So we were never allowed in there. And I knew somewhere in that house was some kind of subterranean vault with all of his awards, all of his pencils, his bags. I did get a couple of awards, though. I got what was called Most Improved. And you're like, Joel, you must have really been improving. I was, but I only got it like once a year. And the reason that they give the Most Improved awards to people like me is they want everybody to feel like they're a part of it. See, I have friends today, parents that are my age, have kids, and they go on and on. We'll get together and be like, yeah, my kid's in this league, you know, this soccer league. They don't keep score. There's no records. You know, what's it like? You know, it wasn't like that when I grew up. You know, everybody was competitive and kept score, and there was trophies. You know, now everybody gets a participation. And I'm like, hold on. It was that way when we were kids because there was a thing called the Most Improved Award. See, the Most Improved Award for people like me meant that for the first 12 weeks of the school year, I was an absolute menace. This won't surprise you. Not only am I not very bright, I tend to be hyperactive, is the word they used in the 80s. And I would give my teachers fits to the point that I would finally get sent to the principal's office, which meant they had to call my mom at work, which meant my mom had to leave work, which meant my mom was beating my tail all afternoon. So I would get in so much trouble after 6, 8, 12 weeks that I would be like, all right, I got to be a good kid for the next 6 weeks, which meant they would say, now is for the most improved. Joel Reynolds. And I would get to march up there with all of the other troublemakers, punks, common criminals. There's one guy in stripes, just wearing striped prison uniform. I don't know how he got into my school, but he was there and he got most improved. It meant that I was really bad for a long period of time. I pulled it together long enough to get my most improved. So when I left school, all I had was most improved awards to show for it. There's a similarity to that. I resonate with some of the people of God in the Old Testament. The people of God were known as the nation of Israel, the Jewish people, the Hebrews, names interchangeable, but that's who they were, and God had selected them. Now, they were the most improved of all the nations in the Old Testament, because they would go through these periods where even though they knew God had done much for them, they had felt an experience. We've talked about it in some series here, where they had been led out of Egypt, out of slavery by God. He parted the sea so they could cross on. He brought the sea back upon their pursuers, the army of Egypt. You know, he had guided them through the wilderness, though it was a difficult time. He fed them. He clothed them. He protected them. Nations much bigger than them would rise up to overtake them, and through the power of God, they were able to defeat them. So they had seen and experienced much, and in their hearts, they should have been like, there's no God like our God. And they did that some of the times. There were other times where they would just get downright prideful, selfish, even sinful, to the point that God, in his anger towards them, would bring consequences. And he does that. And that doesn't mean he's a vindictive God. It means he's a just God, and that's a good thing. And God would bring his consequences on them. And what they had as they got further into the story of the Old Testament, the first part of our Bible, was they started to get into this cycle where they would be obedient and worshipful. They would have this deep connection with God. Then, one way or another, one sin or another, they would show disobedience. And the cycle would be created where they would go from obedience to disobedience to consequences, to judgment even. And what would they do? They would then cry out to God for mercy. They would understand, we've gone way off the rails here. This God has always been good to us, and here we are being sinful, and we're facing the punishment for that. And they would cry out to God, and God would hear them. That cycle is best shown in a book of the Bible called the Book of Judges. If you have a Bible or a tablet or smartphone and you want to go there, go with me to Judges chapter 6. The book of Judges can be summed up in really one phrase that appears over and over and over again throughout the story, where it says, the people of God, the people of Israel, his chosen people, did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, the writer of Judges doesn't mix words, does he? He uses the word evil. It's not like, they did some things good and some things bad. There's no missing what they did here. They did what was evil. Evil in the sight of the Lord. They knew that they shouldn't be that way. They knew that God doesn't want evil, doesn't like evil, that he is love and goodness and truth and just. And so to be evil in his sight, it's a pretty bad thing. And they did evil. And what would happen when they did evil is they would start this cycle that we just talked about. Disobedience, consequence, crying out to God. And what he would do was hear their cries. Because God always does. No matter what you've done, he always hears your cries. He always hears our prayers. No matter what we've done to get there. And God would remember his promise that these people there and these people here, he would remember them. He has a covenant with us. He has a covenant with them. And what he would do was bring them a judge. So the name of the book is not that creative, is it? He would bring a judge. Now we think of judge with a black gown and a gavel, and they sit on a chair and they hit that gavel and they tell you, you've been speeding too much, Mr. Reynolds, here's your fine. But the judge here in the book of Judges was more to be considered a savior. It was men sometimes. Some of the judges were women. Some of the judges were old. Some of the judges were young. And what would happen as the consequences caught up with the people of Israel and God would bring consequences to them and judgment to them, they would cry out to him. He would hear their cries. He would remember his promise and he would show mercy and grace and love to them. Did they deserve it? No. Did he give it freely? Yes. Because he remembers us. He remembers those things and he does not give up on us. And so he would send them a judge. He would send them a judge, men, women, young, old, all across the board, all across the spectrum, just like those of us seated here, called by God to help lead at a significant time, in a moment of crisis, in a moment of pain for the people. And in Judges chapter 6, the consequences that God brings, and often he did this through another nation that he would allow to come in and bring pain, maybe enslave the people so they could face the consequences for the disobedience. And in Judges chapter 6, the Midianite people, another nation not too far away, similar to Israel, but they rose up, God lifted them up, and they swept into the land and overtook Israel, overtook their people. Now, the Midianite people were idolatrous. That meant that they worshiped something other than God that we know him, Almighty God, the creator of the world, who's spoken about throughout the pages of our Bible. They worshiped another God, and that God was called Baal. And Baal was nature, sun, moon. There were multiple Baals in their minds. And they would worship all these different Baals, hoping that maybe Baal would look upon them and bring goodness to their lives. They hoped and prayed that it would work this time. And what they did is throughout Israel, throughout all of these people who had been disobedient and were now facing consequences, they set up altars to Baal all throughout the land. And then it hit them that they were off the rails. The people of Israel saw that they had been defeated, enslaved, were surrounded by altars to false gods, and they did what happens all throughout the book of Judges. They cried out to God, and God heard their cries, and he sent them a judge, and that judge's name is Gideon. That's the story we're going to look at today. He's described to us in Judges 6 and 7 as the next judge. He was the fifth judge described in the book of Judges. And Gideon came, was in the land. He was in the midst of these consequences. He was feeling the pain too. And God came to him to call him to be that next judge. And the best way that we can sum up this conversation and Gideon's response to it was reluctance. Gideon, we got to remember that he was in the midst of this pain, just like his people were, just like everyone around him was. He was feeling these consequences to disobedience, which meant he was probably disobedient himself. He had forgotten what God had done. And now Gideon also, in his tribe, Israel was broken up into 12 tribes. His tribe was considered the smallest and the weakest. And within his tribe, his clan, just one small part of the tribe, was considered the smallest and the weakest. And in his clan, his family was considered the smallest and the weakest. And he used these reasons towards God. He's like, look, I am not your guy. I cannot be your judge. I come from a history of weakness. Small, like I am insignificant in the span of everyone out here. And there were thousands upon thousands of people in the nation of Israel. Surely there's somebody more strong, more skilled, more able to lead at this time. I get the crisis, God, I'm feeling it, but it can't be me. So he was very reluctant to the call that God had laid on his life, what God was asking him to do. What he did is he used these as reasons against what God was calling him to do, which is often what we all do, isn't it? That's why Gideon resonates with me so much. His story, who he was, how he responded. Because so often personally, in my own heart, when I sense something that's going on, I respond with fear or anxiety. Surely you don't mean me, God. You know my past. You know what I've done. I can't be the person to do this. Maybe you do as well. I'm too young. I'm too old. I'm too inexperienced. I'm too uneducated. We give all this litany, all these reasons why God can't do what he's calling us to do. He can't do it in us. Often we do it collectively. That's where I feel us right now as a people, as a gathering. What's going to happen next? Well, I'm too old to be a part of this. We don't have enough young people. We don't have this. We don't have that. We start to worry about all of these things, and we lay out all of these reasons why God certainly can't bring blessing upon Gideon, upon me, upon the gathering. But what God says to Gideon in chapter 6 is, I believe he's saying to you and I as well, if we listen close enough. In Judges chapter 6, verse 23, God says this to Gideon: peace be with you. Do not fear. You shall not die. Now, whether Gideon is smart or anything like that, it doesn't take a scholar to see what God is saying here. Peace. Don't fear. You're not going to die. All around them was an army of Midians. The Midian army, the Midianite people had surrounded them, had enslaved them. They probably had killed people in that process, in the war that they were waging against Israel. But God says to Gideon, don't fear. Have peace. You're not going to die. That's a pretty good promise. When God calls me, I'm like, lay it out for me, God. What's in it for Joel? He does that with Gideon here. This is what you're going to get. Here's the peace. Here's why you don't fear. You're not going to die. That should make Gideon go, all right, I got it. I'll take it. And he does for a moment. See, what Gideon does is he's emboldened by this, and then he goes out into his land, into his nation, among his people, and he starts tearing down, personally, physically, tearing down all of these altars that have been set up all over their land. All of these false gods that the people were being told to worship, that many of them maybe were actively worshiping. They're like, well, I might as well get on board with this Baal thing. He goes down, he tears them all down, he destroys them. And then he does something unique that maybe we've done. I know I have. We're like, all right, did it, God? Woo! Thanks for not killing me. Thanks for not letting them kill me. I'm going to head back to the farm now. I'll be okay, right? And what happens for Gideon, what happens for the people where we're really going to look at this morning over the next couple of minutes is what happens next in the story. God wasn't done with Gideon. God wasn't done with Israel. God's not done with you and me. God's not done with the gathering. Because the Midianites got angry over this. So what they did is they gathered up some allies and they remarched on Israel. They surrounded them again. Now it wasn't just the Midianite people, it was several other nations that they had formed an alliance with for the strict reason of saying, we're going to punish these people for destroying our altars. We're going to get them because they're not totally on board with what we're doing, who we are. And so in Gideon's mind, he thought he was done. In Gideon's mind, he's like, I've done my thing. I was reluctant, but I did it. I was emboldened. I listened to God, and I knew I wasn't going to die, so I went and destroyed it all. And now he's surrounded. See, the reality is for Gideon and for you and I, personally and corporately, collectively, as a group, God can do and will do much with less. But he'll often do more with less too, if that makes sense. He can do anything with anyone, whether you're from the smallest clan, no matter your age, no matter your experience, no matter how long you've been coming to the gathering, how long God's been working in your life. He will do much with less. But very often what we have to realize is that he's still going to call us to do more. Because God's about something bigger than just you and me. He's about something bigger than just this church. He's about something bigger than Gideon and the nation of Israel. He is about moving hope and love and peace to those who need it most. And so he calls Gideon to respond to this attack that's come upon them. Good job tearing down the altars, Gideon, but you're surrounded now, and you're going to fight against them. You're going to be the leader of Israel's army in this battle against these people. Gideon's probably thinking, whoa, 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 I did the thing, and now I've got to do more. And because of that was happening in his mind, what Gideon decides to do was something very unexpected. He decides to test God. He decides to put some experiments out there. See if God can pass this test. And if he does, then Gideon will lead this army against the armies that were surrounding them. Now, let me cheat ahead a little bit. And that's probably the main reason why I always got the most improved award. I didn't get honor roll because I was probably not really working hard. But let me cheat ahead just for you and I, for our sake, as we try to understand the story the best. God will always pass the test. No matter what you lay before him, he is going to pass that test. God is on the honor roll, people. In fact, God is the honor roll. So we can bring whatever test before him, just like Gideon does. God's going to pass that because he is up to something larger than just the questions, the doubts, the fears that we have. He is up to something great, amazing, historic. It was going to take a little testing for Gideon to see and to trust what God was doing, just like it may for you and I. A little bit of testing, a little bit of, if I see this, that's going to keep me going. If I can just know that this is out there somewhere, I'm going to keep coming to the gathering. I'm going to keep giving. I'm going to keep serving in the gathering. See, maybe it's the same for you individually. I definitely believe it's the same for us collectively. So there's three things I want to show you real quick in these last couple of minutes. Three things I want to show you of Gideon's testing of God and how God responds to it and what it means for Gideon and what it can mean for you and I and what it can mean for us. One thing I want you to see is Gideon first gives a science test, and God always passes science. Let's look at the story. Let's pick it up in verse 36 of chapter 6 in Judges. Gideon's done all these things. I just kind of did a long bird's eye view of what was going on. And then God says, now you're going to lead these people against this army. And in verse 36, this is what Gideon does. Then Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I am laying a fleece of wool on the floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone and it's dry on the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. And it was so. The next day he got up, the fleece was wet, the ground was dry. So when he rose in the morning, he squeezed the fleece, he wrung out enough dew from the fleece to fill a bowl with water. So it was pretty damp. This is what we can really break that down there. Then in verse 29, it says this, then Gideon said to God, let not your anger burn against me. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry, the fleece only, and all around the ground let there be dew. And God did so that night, and it was dry on the fleece only, and all around the ground was wet. So what Gideon does is he puts two tests before God. Two tests, both with fleece, both with a towel, essentially. He lays a towel on the ground. It is wet the first night. Everything else is dry. Jump ahead 24 hours. The fleece is dry. Everything else is wet. What's significant here in these verses is not the test and that God passed it. Again, I already told you, God's going to pass the test. It was that there was a test at all. See, it was against Hebrew law. It was against their very religion to test God. Throughout all of the sacred texts of the Israelite people, it said again and again, you do not put God to the test. You don't test him. You don't test him. And Gideon was a good Hebrew boy. And the fact that he said, I'm going to test God, and he speaks it out, it shows by the simple fact that Gideon goes, let not your anger burn against me. He knew that this was going to upset God. Probably somewhere in his mind, he's like, hey, we're in trouble as a people anyway. We're surrounded by thousands and thousands and thousands of enemies. You know, why not? So he puts this test out before God. He was breaking the law. What he was essentially doing was not just unwise, it was sinful at its very core. But what's wild to me is not just that he put that test out there, that God did it. And I'll be honest with you, I don't totally know why. It doesn't say it in the text as to God get into his mind and go, here's why I'm going to do the test. I wish that was there in the Bible sometimes. It's not here in this story. So I don't totally know why. I do think that there's probably two reasons why God, this is my guess, all right? This is KJV, the King Joel version here. This is my guess what God did this. One reason that I think God this is that God was up to something bigger than Gideon and any test that Gideon could bring to him. See, sometimes we jump all onto God's mission. We hear it, we know it, we're like, I am there. Put me in. Whatever you need me to do. Sometimes we jump onto God's mission, but sometimes God's mission jumps onto us. And that's what was going on with Gideon. He had been reluctant from the beginning. He had been fearful and anxious from the beginning. His mind all over the place. Like, really, me, us now? In the midst of all of this? And so God's mission had to jump all over Gideon. And maybe it's doing the same for you. I pray that it is. Of everything that's going on here amongst us now. Where we are as the gathering, I'm praying God's mission jumps all over some people. They say, I'm in. I'm grateful for those who jump right in, but I'm also grateful that God's mission is bigger than any one person, just like it was bigger than Gideon. Because the reality is, when it comes to these fleece, when it comes to the towels that he laid out, God does much with these two towels. And that should be symbolic for our life. God can do much with the very simple things that we bring. The very simple people that we are. God will do much. God will do great things. God does much with two towels right here to prove to Gideon that he is going to save him, that he is at work, that he's up to something big. Imagine what he could do with just one towel. Imagine what he could do with just one of you. One person saying, I'm willing to go. As scary as it is, as overwhelming as it is, I'm willing to go. See, when God asks the impossible, he asks it only because God does the impossible. It was his major. It was his minor. He has a PhD in it. God does the impossible all the time, just like he's going to do in Judges 6 and 7, just like he's going to do at Gathering with you, with me. See, that was one of the reasons I think God was doing this, that he said, I don't like to be tested because I'm God and you're Gideon, but I'll do this test. And he passes that scientist. But I think there's another reason. The other reason is that God is about to test Gideon. God's like, all right, you want to throw a test at me? I'll throw some right back at you. I always pass science. Let me see if you can pass math. And that's the other thing I want us to see, is God always aces math. Pick up in chapter 7 with me. So Gideon's done these experiments. God's passed them. And now God does something significant with Gideon. He tests him right back. Then Gideon and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Morith in the valley. So basically, he saw that God was going to pass this test. He could not deny that God was calling him and God was going to save the people. So he took an army and he marched against the army that was encamped against them. A battle was about to happen. A war was about to go down. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give to the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand saved me. So now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, in the ears of your army, Gideon, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. Then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. They went from 32,000 to 10,000. Whoa. Gideon's probably like, man, I should have never done that fleece thing. I definitely shouldn't have done it twice. Because this is what I get. I get 10,000. I had 32,000. Now I got 10,000. And then the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many in verse 4. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And any one of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, shall go with you. And any one of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not go. So God's like, hey, I got another test. You tested me twice. I'm going to test you twice. I'm going to test your army twice. And he's like, if I tell you this one's in and this one's out, you got to obey it. And Gideon's like, well, you've got the doctrine. And so he brought the people down to the water in verse 5. And the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog drinks, you shall set him by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink, you set them apart. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men. But all the rest of the people knelt down to drink the water, like a dog. We've all seen that happen. Maybe with the dog in your house, maybe with a child in your house. I would be lying if I said my kids have never done that. God says this is how we're going to divide it up. Of these 10,000, those who go down to the water and just lay down beside the brook and start to drink directly from it, they're not going with you into battle. Those who kneel and scoop the water to their mouth, that's your army. And then Gideon's like, okay. And then there's only 300 of them did it. I bet Gideon was like, wait, no, not okay. Really? That's what I get? He goes from 32,000 to 10,000, from 10,000 to 300. Now, there's no specific reason why it was that or the other than God was getting to that small number. God was going to do more with less. He was going to do much with less. I'd like to think that those who knelt down beside the water and were drinking it kept their eyes at such a way that they could see any battle coming. The best warriors are the ones who are ready, who are prepared, who are willing to fight even if they're getting a drink of water. Those who are laying down, putting their faces in the water, drinking up, they're not going to see if an arrow comes their way. So God not only was bringing a smaller number together, he was probably giving Gideon the best warriors. But again, that's just Joel. That's just the KJV. But from 32,000 to 300, this is what he gets. Now, let me be honest with you. Do I think God's math is crazy? Absolutely. Absolutely. I do not get it. That's because I'm a human. I'm not God. Gideon probably thought it was crazy too. Because I think God is all about numbers. I completely believe that God takes numbers seriously. Numbers matter to God. Numbers of people, the sizes and what that can be. But I have to say all of that with this caveat, that I believe it's the right numbers that matter to God. The right hearts, the right spirits, the right ministers and warriors and those who are ready to be on mission are what matters to God. Because it's through them, whether it be 32,000 or 300, it is the right numbers that God can do great things with. That God's going to do great things right here with you and I. Because God does much with 300 warriors. God does much with 300 warriors. Why? Because bigger isn't always better. That's not spiritual math. Big is humans. And God said straight up to Gideon and straight up to you and I, we're going to call this down because if you march with them with 32,000 in your army, they're going to say, we did this. We accomplished this. We succeeded. We saved ourselves. And that's not how it's going to be. Not in this battle, not in our battle, not in any battle. It is the Lord's. We trust him. God is bigger because he is about his glory, not Gideon's glory. God is bigger because he is about not Israel's glory, but his glory. God is concerned with his glory and his glory alone. And that doesn't make him selfish. That doesn't make him conceited, because the truth of the matter is only God's glory can save. Only God's glory can do something in the lives of those who need it most. Only God's glory can do something in your life, in my life, in the life of our church. Only God's glory can save Israel in this battle. Only God's glory can save you. Only God's glory can save whoever walks into this room today, next Sunday, or any Sunday thereafter. Only God can do that. And God's bigger than math. God's bigger than science. God is about history and making history. Gideon brought his tests. God passed them. Gideon received God's tests. God passed those as well. All because God is about making history. Let's look at the last couple verses, then I'll hush up. In verse 7 of chapter 7, it says this: "And the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands, and let all the others go home." So the people took provisions in their hands and the trumpets, and he sent all the rest of Israel to their tent, but he retained the 300. He retained these 300 warriors, and the camp of Midian was below them in the valley. Verse 9, that same night, the Lord said to Gideon, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hands. God's about making history, and he's about to make history with Gideon, with Israel. He's about to make history with you and I. He's about to make history with us, because that same God who called Gideon is the same God who's calling the gathering. And he says, arise, go. I have given you this mission. Be about that. See, what we are called to do isn't about the most power or the most people, but it's about the right power and the right people for God to do something. God does much with one person. Give him towels, he's going to pass that test every time. Give him warriors, he's going to pass that test every time. But he's always going to be scaling it down to that one right person, filled with that one right power that comes from God. He does that in Gideon, and I believe he's doing it right here with us. What he does here with Gideon, and it took him a long time to get there, didn't it? Gideon was reluctant. Gideon gave his test. Gideon was tested by God. Took him a long time to get there, but God said, now you're in the right place. So arise, go forward. I've given this mission into your hands, Gideon. Many of us have taken the long way around to get here, haven't we? Many renegades right here in this room. You came kicking and screaming. Today you're still sitting in here kicking and screaming. I give you this truth. God is ready to make history with you, with us, with the gathering. Because all we are going to do is try to bring glory to God. Every time we sing, every time we pray, every time we give, every time we serve, every time we preach, every time we reach out to the world around us, every time we go on mission, every time we serve in this community, it's about God's glory, his history, letting him do something great. That's the only history that matters. In fact, that's the only math and science that matters. Because it all boils down to one answer, to one number, that one God doing one thing through one person, just like Gideon, just like Paula Foster, just like David Foster, just like you, doing one great thing through one great person, so his glory and his glory alone can be shown. See, friends, we're about one mission here. Connecting those who need to know that there's hope for them. Connecting them to that one person, God. To that one God that they need to know, that they need to bring hope and feel hope and connect to. We today, no matter who stands at this table, is about one mission, to reach one person, to connect them to one God. And all of that adds up, not to 3, but to much. So we can provide much hope, bring much truth, bring much love into every single person in our life, every single person around us, every single person who walks in this door. God is calling us. He's calling you, I pray. I hope it's jumping all over you, or you're ready to jump all in. But he's calling you, that one person, to be the next Gideon that the gathering needs. The next Gideon that your neighbor needs. The next Gideon that your husband or wife needs. The next Gideon that your coworker needs. The next Gideon that your classmate needs. The next Gideon that your Kroger check person needs. That your accountant needs. That the person in your yoga class needs. That the person at the dog park needs. That the person who is hurting and broken and feeling like God has given up on them, that they need much hope. God's about to make history in us, in you, in the lives of that one person who needs to know that one God. And we're going to bring them much hope. So let's arise. Let's go about it and do great things for God's glory today and all the days to come. Will you join me in prayer? Father, we thank you for this amazing story of this very fleshly, sinful human person named Gideon, reluctant in the call, unwise in testing you, fearful, overwhelmed. Thank you for his story, for me and maybe for others in this room, because I needed to hear that you do much with the weak, much with the fearful, much with the overwhelmed. And you are about to do it with us. You are doing it in us and around us. So God, for the mission that we're called to do, to honor you and to connect you, to help others connect with you, so hope can be felt, so life change can be felt, so salvation can come. I pray, God, that you will do great things in our midst, with us, around us, in us. God, I pray for a room full of Gideons, taking a long way to get there, but here nonetheless, and ready to be about your mission, to be about your glory, to see history be made right before our eyes, right in our very lives. God, thank you for these people. Thank you for this chance to gather. And I pray that you set us loose today, ready to fight for your glory to all who need it now and forevermore. Amen and amen. I'm really, really grateful that you guys are here today. It's always good to see you, always good to be with you. A couple things that I need you to know, all right? The next 2 Sundays I'll be out, all right? I got to go to Mississippi and be with the Guard. It's my 2 weeks of training per year. So I'll be leaving on Saturday, be gone for the next couple of Sundays, all right? I'm going to miss you guys while I'm gone. I would covet any prayers that you could lift up for me, because it is a very trying time, physically, emotionally. Even yesterday, a week out from going, I was getting calls from soldiers about different things. There's already stuff going on that I'm tracking on and working on and helping serve them. And it's only going to amplify when we hit the ground in Mississippi next week. So I'll be looking forward to being back with you guys right at the beginning of July. Next Sunday, Father's Day. Happy Father's Day early, by the way. One of my dearest, best friends in the whole world is going to come here and preach in my absence. His name is Kyle Wiltshire. Kyle works at Lifeway downtown, and he is in a ministry there that is the largest mission sending group for teenagers in the world. They send thousands and thousands and thousands of teenagers across the country, around the world, every single summer, and they go on mission in communities, doing home repairs, Bible schools, working in social organizations, helping feed the homeless. I mean, they do incredible stuff. I've been a student in the World Changers group that he works for. I've taken youth on it, and I'm honored that Kyle works there now. Kyle and I were seminary classmates, and just made a friendship day one, and it stuck. And I asked him a while back, can you come in on Father's Day? He is a father of 3, 2 boys and a girl. And Kyle's going to be here next week. Ask him any question you have about U2. He's going to answer it. Ask him any question you have about professional wrestling. He's probably going to answer it. Ask him any question you want about the classic 80s sitcom, A Different World. He's going to be able to answer it, all right? That's what he's passionate about. But above all, he is passionate about his family. He's passionate about his relationship with Jesus, and he's passionate about preaching. He's going to do a great job. So come and hear him, support him, encourage him, and make fun of his tall, gangly stature, all right? You can tell him I told you to do that, all right? But he'll be here the week after. Paula is going to be coming and preaching that Sunday. It'll be her last day with us officially as executive director. Whether I was here or not, it was going to be Paula's day to speak, all right? It just worked out in our calendar that it works out well for me, since I'll be gone that Sunday as well. And then I'll be back here July 5th, ready to rock and roll and move forward into this next chapter of the gathering. All right, you guys got it? All right, good. Have a great week. I love you guys. I'll see you soon.